Let's get started. This month's episode of Design Dialogues is Designing with Flavor. Thank you so much for everybody who is here. If you've attended in the past, this is all going to be really familiar to you. But for those who are just joining us today, this, for your first time, this is a panel that we have three wonderful guests, and we're going to be talking about edible gardens for this particular panel. So we have people with different experience here. We'll have a list of questions that we'll go through, but it very much is a conversation. So as I mentioned, if you have questions, please put them into the Q&A so that we can address those immediately. So some of the things that we're going to go through really quickly, ease of use and design. So edible kitchens, the easier they are to use, the more likely you are to use them. That's just, I think, the function of any good design. It can enhance the cooking experience. We're going to go through some design considerations just based off of the experience of everybody on this panel. How to balance aesthetics and productivity, also something really important in these types of applications. And then because we have a panel with such vast array of experience, we do want to learn from everything that they have kind of learned along the way. So hopefully we'll get some anecdotes out of them as well. I'll let them introduce themselves. I'll start off quickly just by introducing myself. My name is Ashley Smith, and I am the Director of Architect and Designer Partnerships with Urban Bonfire and Kalamazoo. I've been working in the outdoor kitchen world for just about 9.5 years. And before that, I was an interior designer. So I love doing these because I get to learn so much. It's even if you've been in an industry for a decade, there's still always so much to learn. And so I've had a great time with these panels, and I'm looking forward to this one. So Gabrielle, do you want to start off by introducing yourself?
Yes, thank you. I'm Gabrielle Krake, and I'm the owner of Be Wise Gardens. And our specialty is building sanctuaries for both humans and nature. So we really focus on native populations and different types of habitat and bringing back more native plants to support those native pollinators. And of course, we do anywhere from very small projects to very large projects, and most of our gardens do include some kind of food introduction, whether that's a raised garden or a very elaborate raised garden system. And then we also, bring the irrigation to that, and we teach people how to use natural methods to grow their food and flowers.
I do highly recommend following Be Wise Gardens. I'm a new follower of them on Instagram. That's how we connected originally, and their content is really quite something. If you like gardening, I do recommend that quick follow. Just a little plug in there. Elizabeth, do you want to go next with your quick intro?
Sure. My name is Elizabeth Mabad. I've been gardening for, I would say, 15 years. I have no formal experience in it, but I have a very strong passion for it, and it's pretty much all I do in my retirement now.
So yes, Elizabeth came to us because we were lucky enough to work with her on the design of her outdoor kitchen, and she shared some images of her garden space, which you'll see in the background as we go through questions. And you'll see that even though there's no formal training, that it's extremely beautiful. So she has a lot to contribute to the conversation as well. And Faith, do you want to go next?
Hi, I'm Faith Ford. I curate edible or kitchen gardens that are beautiful and productive. Through my company, I help build and design and build kitchen gardens for aspiring gardeners like you. I'm passionate about helping people learn how to grow food at their own home that's organic and flavorful.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Faith. And Faith and I were lucky enough to meet earlier this year, and she was kind of my inspiration for this panel. So really happy to have you here today. All right, so we'll just have a quick slideshow that's going to be happening in the background. We have lots of images from everybody on the panel here who has contributed to this, but let's dive into our first question. So Elizabeth, I'm going to start directing this one to you. And the question is, what are the most important considerations when incorporating an edible garden into an outdoor living or kitchen space from your experience? What are the highest tips basically that you would tell somebody when they're first starting out?
I mean, I think the most obvious thing is sunlight. I tracked the sun during every single season. I looked at where the trees were going to do, because you don't want your guests to be cooking in the sun, and you don't want your gardens to be sitting in the shade. But aside from the obvious, I think the biggest thing is just really trying to figure out what your personal priorities are. And for us, we're party animals. We love to entertain. So we ended up building a huge greenhouse. And the greenhouse, the reason it was such a big deal for us is because we realized, first of all of my seedlings would finally be out of the house. My husband wouldn't be tripping over them in the spring anymore. But the bigger thing was it's this big 16 by 24 greenhouse. We can easily fit like 20 to 30 guests in there. It's heated in the winter. It's fantastic to sit in there when it's raining. And during the summer, we can draw the shades, turn the AC on. And so there's fruit trees in there too, tropical fruit trees. So it's just, I think it's about prioritizing what's important to you. And for us, it was, being able to cook for our guests, entertain them in a very comfortable space. And yeah.
And everything tastes better when you cook it outside and you have grown it yourself. This is what I have come to find in like the few cucumbers and tomatoes that I'm able to grow. They're so much more delicious.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. Faith, do you have anything that you want to add to that? The most important considerations when incorporating an edible garden into your space?
I mean, Elizabeth's absolutely right. Sunshine is the most important thing you want to find about for your garden specifically. 6 to 8, 8 preferably, if not more. If you want to do like leafy greens, you can do 4+ hours. Roots, you can do 6+ hours. And fruits, like we mentioned, you want as much sunlight as possible. Water, you want to be close to a water source or have irrigation set up. Accessibility and convenience. It's the closer it is to your indoor kitchen or outdoor kitchen, you're more likely to be in your garden. And that is just the saying out of sight, out of mind is definitely true when it comes to gardens. So the closer it can be to your kitchen. A good setup is really important. If you're interested in designing a garden, it's really important to spend that little extra time and do a proper setup, because that will make all the difference in the long run. And aesthetically, you want it to match your house or your surroundings.
Yeah, this is a big thing we talk about in kitchens too. You don't want it to seem like an afterthought. You want it to seem like it's an intentional part of the design right from the beginning. So yeah, fitting in with the existing aesthetic. Gabrielle, I saw you nodding along to a lot of what Faith was saying.
Yes.
Did you have things that you wanted to add on to that?
Those are all absolutely essential for sure. And where we usually start is exactly that. We need to know that there's going to be enough sun for a particular garden. But then our biggest obstacle usually is soil. And so it's super important to have either very amended soil, like you need to find out what kind of soil you're going to plant the garden in. And now, obviously, if you're going to do a raised garden, you're going to be adding, good garden soil to that, and it isn't going to affect it as much. Or it won't negatively affect it as opposed to when you're planting directly in the ground. And so, but we kind of do a combination of both, or sometimes our raised gardens aren't very tall, so the plants are going to touch the native soil pretty quickly, especially in a kitchen garden and tomatoes and that kind of thing. So even if we are doing a raised bed, we're still going to assess the soil underneath that raised bed.
Is there any type of soil, I don't even know the right words, but composition, I'll say, that you don't want to be planting food specific gardens?
For us, where we are, we're very extreme temperatures and we have very poor soil. So we live in the high desert. We have a lot of sand, but a lot of clay. And so clay, there are things that will tolerate clay, but you have to get organic matter mixed into that clay, because otherwise it holds, it doesn't let water drain. And so then you'll put in a beautiful raised bed, and if the water isn't draining, your raised bed is just wet all the time. And then there are some things that will tolerate that, but most things want to have proper drainage. And so if we come to a yard that really is either hard pan or heavy clay, then we have to deal with the soil underneath, no matter what the raised bed situation is.
So funny because when you think planting, you think like I'm digging a hole in the ground and putting something into it, or like to a beginner like me, this is what I think. But there's so many more considerations that you need to take into account when, especially, I imagine specifically also when it is something that you plan on eating, then there's a little bit more consideration that has to go into
Sure,
that.
absolutely.
Kind of playing on the soil question, but how do you determine the best location for a layout of a kitchen garden specifically? Again, to everybody's point, so that it's practical, it's inviting, so that you actually use it, but also so that it can survive. I mean, we've talked about sun, but are there any other kind of practical tips or things that you consider? Gabrielle, I'll start with you there too.
For us, again, because of our weather, we don't have any temperate weather, like just because we are a zone 7. So we definitely have, you know, a really good growing zone, but we are either extremely hot or cool, you know, and going into cold. And so we have a very short spring and fall in the sense of what most people in a more temperate climate would have, maybe more like you in Michigan, where it's like, you know, summer, then it's just fall for a minute and then it's winter. And so what we're trying to do is get maximum also sun coverage, not just the hours in the day, but we plant gardens if we can east to west. So our garden beds are going in a certain direction so that the sun is going over and covering that east to west garden shape, as opposed to turning it this way, and you're going to create shade. Now that when we have done that, then we just suggest to people that when it's going to be the shade side, when it's the warmest part of the day, that's where they would put their leafy greens, their basil, the things that don't necessarily love that burning sun, and put your peppers and tomatoes on the other side of the bed. And, you know, and then you can work with that.
Amazing. Again, something so simple. The sun follows the same trajectory every day. So if you can use that in the design, that makes a lot of sense. You get more sun that way. I'm in a more urban area, so I do have buildings that I have to deal with around me that interfere with the sun a little bit, but I'll definitely consider that for next year. Faith, did you have anything that you wanted to add, kind of more on your experience specifically of kitchen gardens as well, and like how you incorporate that so that people use that as a as much as they can?
Again, this is sunlight, but Gabrielle hit that perfectly. You want it on the south
Yeah.
side. And keeping it close and convenient to your home. So again, keep it close to your kitchen. You want nice pathways. You want accessible water, and you want it inviting. So maybe you can put some, you know, chairs or a sitting table. Um,
Make it so that
yes.
you want to be there and then you interact with it more. If I'm not mistaken, all of your designs are raised garden beds as well, right, Faith?
Yes, I do. I specialize in raised bed kitchen gardens. At my personal home, I do in-ground gardening.
Okay. I think the nice thing about having like the raised bed gardening specifically, and we see that a lot, like we make planters and people try to, you know, incorporate any greenery wherever they can, especially in an urban environment. But I mean, the nice thing about that is that you can add it in wherever. So you're not dealing with the soil and you can kind of move it around in the sun. I was in a courtyard, and so I had a planter on wheels that I would wheel my tomatoes around so that it got enough sun throughout the day. I think that's a nice, I mean, it's like the extreme version of it. But I think that's the nice thing about seeing so many more of these like raised planter beds, is that then you have so much more control over where everything is. You can place it right next to the kitchen so that it's actually getting used and getting the amount of sun that it needs.
Yeah.
Are there any strategies or design choices that you make uh, that make, sorry, kitchen gardens simple and sustainable for clients to maintain? So I don't know, any materials, or what are the kind of factors that you consider so that it's kind of the least amount of maintenance to your clients? Again, because I have found that if it needs to be maintained, then once it gets too far gone, then the client doesn't use it. So what are your tips and tricks when kind of considering that with your clients? Faith, I'll start with you there.
There are four main things that I consider when I'm building a kitchen garden. Usually we start with defining the area with a border. So finding a good area that it fits naturally into your landscape. Putting gravel down, and usually a border to kind of define the space. And then we'll put gravel down to kind of help keep the weeds out and also to protect your beds from any sort of lawn maintenance like weed whackers. And raised beds are great too because you can control the soil a little bit more, quite a bit more actually. And they warm up in colder climates, so you can start growing faster in cooler climates, but you just have more control of your soil and amending it. And trellises, if it's an arch trellis or a panel trellis that is just flat, or an obelisk trellis that goes straight up, a lot of those will help you grow vertically and will keep your plants off the ground. Aesthetically, it looks really nice, but it also helps keep your plants healthier.
In terms of materials that you use for the bed specifically, are there certain ones that you have as your go-tos? Like for the outside
Cedar.
material?
Yeah, so wood, you typically want to go for some rot resistant wood like cedar or redwood. You can use corten, you could do brick and stucco, you could do stone. It really depends on your budget and your aesthetics and really what your overall goal is. If you're, I mean, that's a big thing too, knowing what your overall goal is and what you want to get out of it. Is it aesthetics? Is it learning? Is it productivity? So it really depends on the person and what their overall goal is. But from aesthetics point of view, it's really nice to match the home.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Gabrielle, did you want to add on to that? What strategies or design choices make kitchen gardens simple and sustainable for clients to maintain?
Basically our first conversation that we have with somebody is to plant mostly what they like eating. That there
Yes.
can be some experimentation for sure, but what we've found is when people get too, when they go to the nursery and they're like, oh my gosh, I want this eggplant and I want this pepper and then they realize, oh, I really only like cherry tomatoes and cucumbers, but then they feel bad because all of that stuff starts getting overgrown. And so we implement the square foot gardening method where, basically every square foot is taken up by something, but if something naturally gets 3 feet across, then it gets to take up 3 squares in that, as opposed to letting things get so packed in that then you start getting like in our area, we get airflow problems, and then you get powdery mildew, and then, there's different pests that will come in if there's not really good airflow. So we plant things especially in the vegetable and fruit area, a little bit more sparsely so that everything can be maintained and looked at and pruned properly. And we definitely implement trellises and any kind of vertical growing just to give people so they can really see it well. They can see their cucumbers hanging, they can see their cherry tomatoes hanging, and therefore they'll eat them more readily if they're not digging around in the foliage looking for their food.
I imagine that makes it easier for you see when things start to rot and for weeding, and just having that easier access in between all of the plants as well
Right.
helps with that maintenance. Yeah. It's one of the worst feelings. I'm in Montreal, so similar weather to Michigan, which is what you mentioned before, because that's
yeah.
where we're manufactured. But it's the spring. I'm always so overwhelmed every time I have to go out into my garden after the spring because there's just so much that I need to do. But you get through it, and then it's easy to maintain for the rest of the year. But certainly something that we have to deal with. Elizabeth, based on your experience, especially with your own garden, do you have any strategies or design choices that you would recommend to people to make it easier and more sustainable for clients to maintain?
So yeah, I would say for me, if you guys don't have raised beds, definitely use heavily amended soil. That's the first thing when we were redoing our backyard that I told my contractor. I just told him, dig it all up because we have really heavy clay and it's just not fun to dig in clay. So heavily amend your soil, your plants will be prettier. It'll be easier to work in the winter or the spring when you're redoing things. The other thing that helped me a lot when I was first starting out was creating a maintenance calendar for myself. And that sounds overwhelming at first, but the way I set it up was I created priorities so that I could decide which tasks were absolutely essential and which tasks I could kind of let slide, because we have lives, we've got kids, we've got things that we need to do, and sometimes we just can't maintain a perfect garden. So a calendar with priorities was really helpful for me and actually reduced my stress levels.
I love a to-do list, and that sounds like basically the garden equivalent of a to-do list. So I can appreciate that. How do you balance beauty and productivity in a kitchen garden design? I think you talked about making sure it was pretty, Elizabeth, so I'll let you kind of continue on that. What's the like fine balance in between the two?
I really like natural materials. I really love stone. It's kind of expensive, but even mulch or like wood. But whatever you think is pretty. If you like a more modern garden, then that's fine. But I think the bigger thing for me is that it's already beautiful. So I just like to highlight it. So I think polycultures in a garden bed are gorgeous because you can get really nice contrast with the foliage. I love purple basil for that reason, and red shiso because you've got these really beautiful dark pops of color. I love, varying the texture of the foliage, like, carrot foliage is really nice and kind of frilly, right? So for me, it's already beautiful, and I just love to highlight it. The other thing we did is when we put fruit trees on our back bank, we put up lights under every single one of them. And when they're flowering in the spring, if you go down there at night and you just see all the flowers like uplit, it's absolutely stunning. So I mean that's it for me. It's already beautiful to me.
Yeah, enhancing what's already there basically, and playing
Mhm.
with shapes and heights, and yeah, I love that. Letting it speak for itself essentially, and just doing what you can
Yeah.
to let it show itself off. Gabrielle, did you have anything that you wanted to add to that? Do you have any other tips?
Definitely that I agree with all of that. And then we also mix a lot of medicinal type flowers in. And so we grow a lot of like tea gardens and medicinal gardens. And so because again, we're trying to invite people into the garden. We want the kids to come into the garden. We want them to taste a nasturtium, eat a chive flower, different, obviously echinacea is edible. There's so many things that are edible. And so even if it's like a perimeter garden that has those like Augustaceae and bergamot and those kinds of things, it can also be cut flowers, but they can also be dried and used in recipes. And so we're just like this one on the slide. I mean, it's just so beautiful. And then we try to educate people on what isn't edible. So then make sure you only cut this and put it in a vase as opposed to this you can definitely throw in a salad.
Amazing. I was going to ask that. How often are flowers incorporated into edible gardens? Like, do you see a mix of it? Because I mean, it can get
Mhm.
a little bit, I would say, monotone, I suppose. It depends what you're growing, because some of the fruits and vegetables are a little bit more colorful. But yeah, a way to break up the green a little bit. So edible flowers, yeah, I love that. You see it on a salad.
Or
Beautiful.
like,
Great for
yeah, and like we'll also let things go to seed. So like if you don't get to all of your broccoli or all of your different brassicas, we'll let those things flower because the pollinators absolutely love them. And then we'll make kimchi out of that kind of thing. And so you teach people how to, utilize these things that appear like they're, oh, this is gone or done, like kale, flowers or whatever, but then you make something from it.
Yeah, amazing. We've discussed this a little bit, but I want to get into how you encourage your clients to actually use the garden. Gabrielle, I hadn't originally said that I was going to ask you this question, but I'm going to go back to you because you had just mentioned involving kids as well, which is something that I hadn't really considered. But I love that idea of getting them involved, because I mean, if the kids are involved, then the parents are involved. And I feel like that is just this great circle to ensure that the garden actually gets used. And it's also this amazing educational piece. So
Yes.
just wanted to point that out really quick, because it was definitely something, again, I'm learning so much. I feel like every time I talk, I'm like, this is something I haven't considered before. So this is why I love doing this. Um, Faith, was there anything that you wanted to add to that? I know you said proximity obviously is a huge thing, and having the raised garden bed just makes it a little bit easier for people to be able to work in. But is there anything else that you would say that can encourage people to use their edible gardens more often?
Yeah, just uh, going back to what Gabrielle said is plant what you love to eat. That's really important. And yeah, I do find that even one of my biggest struggles was I could plant this stuff, I could grow it, but learning how to cook. So I think that's wonderful that Gabrielle, that you're teaching how to make kimchi with the older brassica leaves. That's wonderful. And I know I've also taught I'm a garden instructor also. And a lot of times with my students, we'll create things from the garden. We'll do natural dyeing, or we'll try to do projects from the garden. But that's a great way to get kids involved. But sometimes you grow it and you have the skill as a gardener, but you need to learn the skill also to be a better cook.
That's fair. Yeah. That'll be step 2. Maybe we'll have some chefs on how to use the produce that you're growing in your edible garden a little bit more effectively. I've definitely had many tomatoes that have gone bad because I just haven't had enough practice and to use them. But this year, it'll be better this year. Elizabeth, based on your own garden, are there things that you have found that you have done or maybe swapped out because you found that you weren't using it as much? And what are kind of the tips that you would say to somebody else starting out in your shoes?
Um, you know, I have swapped things out, but I never regret starting something weird. Actually, that would be my advice is I think you need, well, it depends on your personality, but for me, I need a balance between some simple things and some more complicated passion projects to keep me interested. I love a challenge. I love to kind of push my garden and see what I can get away with. All of my fruit trees are actually grown in part shade and they're producing beautifully because I've chosen those varieties for that reason and I've experimented. So I mean, for me, I love to experiment and try new things and see what works, and that's part of what gets me going back out there. This year I had a few things fail, but I have things fail every year and I'll try new things next year. So
It's all part of the process, a little
yeah,
trial and error.
it's the journey, not the destination.
Yeah, I think you have to embrace that. It's true. Is there any key lesson or like aha moment that you've discovered when planting, or cooking from a kitchen garden that you wish more people knew? Elizabeth, I'll start with you on that.
Yeah, I would say that you should, I mean, this was an early lesson for me, is that plant labels aren't always it's not that they're not accurate, it's just that plants are living things and they're going to have moods. They're going to do better some years and worse other years because, there's different amounts of sunlight, different amounts of rainfall every year. And so you should expect that. You should expect a certain amount of failure in your garden and you should embrace that process and enjoy it. And know that it's not because you necessarily did something wrong. It's just, it's a living thing. So yeah.
It's a great point. It's a living thing. Sometimes they have hard years. Us living
Yeah.
things have hard times sometimes. So that goes to plants too. Gabrielle, do you have any aha moment or like a key lesson that you want people to take away from this?
Well, and what she just said was really good because we tell people pretty often that plants are more like pets and less like decor. And a lot of times people will do landscapes and gardens and all of that because they want it to look a certain way, but they're not considering the fact that this is something that has to be tended. So we have had to learn, over the years to have the really hard conversation with a potential client. How much time do you have to spend in this space? How much time do you want to spend in this space? Like, how important is this to you? And get people to really dig deep and go, oh, yeah, I want it, but I really don't have any time. And so then we're like, okay, so then you need to employ a gardener. And people really, this was a aha for me this summer. people have no problem paying somebody to mow their lawn, to edge their lawn, to prune their trees. But for some reason, when it comes to like these smaller garden spaces, they're suddenly like, oh, I have to do it, or I'm going to make my kids do it, or when it's pretty inexpensive to have somebody that does this for a living come through your yard once a week and just make sure everything looks good. And it's less expensive than mowing. It's, you know, or some of those other services. And so it was like, so we actually kind of lead with that conversation with people now, where we're like, okay, so if this is not something, if you're just going to come out and pick a few tomatoes before you eat, as opposed to tending your garden, then definitely if you want to feel more successful and you want to feel like this wasn't a waste of an investment, then consider having somebody help you with it.
Follow-up question to that, just because I just planted a garden this year. I just redid my yard, and so everything is new, and I'm finding that it requires a lot of attention because it's new. Is that something that changes throughout the like lifespan of a garden? I mean, we're saying that they have hard years sometimes as well, or like hard times, but is there more, I guess, maintenance that's required in the beginning, and does that peter out, or is it pretty much the same the whole way through?
Well, for us, I mean, any kind of annual garden, it's going to be the same every year because you're
Sure.
replanting those annuals. If it's perennials mixed in, then those obviously become less and less maintenance because maybe you're only deadheading them once a year. So I would say, but then like was mentioned, there are just good years where you think, oh my gosh, I've arrived because I got 9,000 cucumbers this year. And then next year, for whatever reason, you get 4. And it's
Sure.
usually not something that you did. It is something that is maybe out of your control a little bit. Temperature fluctuations in the early spring, damaged roots from the nursery or from you if you grew it in your greenhouse, it missed getting watered 2 days in a row. I mean, there can be lots of little minute things that can affect plants drastically to the plant, especially annuals because they're short-lived.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a great point. I guess most edible gardens, like especially in climates like ours, they're basically all annual, right? Unless it's herbs,
Yeah,
essentially.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh no, that means I have to start over next year. I was just getting the hang of it. Faith, did you have anything that you wanted to add, key lessons or aha moments as
Yeah, I
takeaways
think
for
as a
anybody here?
beginner gardener, learning the seasons and what plants grow in what season is one of the main things that you can learn. Um, Knowing that like in your cooler seasons you need your leafy greens and your carrots and your beets, and in the warmer seasons you can do like tomatoes and eggplants and cucumbers. So learning your specific area and your temperature ranges will help you sort of define what you should be planting when. And I would say just start small, like start small, start with some herbs and lettuce, particularly in the cool season. I mean, there's nothing better than fresh cut lettuce from your garden to make a salad. Um, and celebrate your failures because that's how you learn. Like, you really learn by things that don't work out, and then you just keep evolving. But one of the main things that has been the aha moment for me is that healthy plants have more flavor, and healthy plants equals healthy soil. So really taking care of your soil is really important. You're lucky if you start out with a raised bed and if you get good amendments and good compost, and you get a proper soil. But some things you can do to kind of take care of your soil is at the end of the season, like you're going to be coming up, Ashley, is cut all your plants down at the or at the soil level and leave the roots in the ground to decompose, because that will add good organic matter and it will help feed the life in the soil, which ultimately that feeds your plants. So keeping the roots in the soil, adding good compost, investing in good compost here in the States. Malibu is really good. Malibu compost is good. Just doing a little bit of research or getting some earthworm castings, just a bag of that, and amending your soil. And aesthetically, it's not for everyone, but mulching can really help, like straw mulching in a kitchen garden. That really helps keep moisture in and also feed your soil. and using organic amendments if you're going to feed your plants with anything, using like fish and kelp emulsion. Those are all things that will really keep your soil really nice and healthy, and that will feed your plants, and that will help you have a more productive and beautiful garden.
Amazing. I was going to ask if there are any tips for, because we're, it's coming towards the end of the gardening season. We're all in, well, the two of you are in similar climates, Elizabeth and Faith, but are there, what are your tips to people to get them basically on the ground running for the beginning of next year? Like, I think you just said yours, Faith. Elizabeth, did you have any that you've come across that things that you can do maybe in the cooler seasons to get you really prepared for those warmer seasons where maybe you have more growth?
I agree with everything she just said. Leave the roots in. Definitely add amendments to your soil, compost. I use worm castings all the time. And then, have fun planning, I guess. That's the really fun part in the winter months, is sitting there with your little sheet and writing out what you're going to be putting in the ground and setting up your seedlings. Yeah.
And I guess figuring out what worked this year, because you'll have a good idea by this point as well, and
Definitely
maybe
take
what you're
notes.
replacing. Is there anything that you plant in the fall season in your edible garden?
Yeah, so I just put saffron in. We have 1,000 saffron bulbs. They're going to be coming up, I would probably say October, November. My kids have tiny fingers, so they'll be in there pulling the saffron out. They actually really enjoy it. I'm not using them as slave labor. They love gardening with me. And yeah, we've got Brussels sprouts, broccoli, whole bunch of leafy greens, leeks, parsnips, and I just planted something called skirret, which apparently was grown in the Middle Ages. And I don't know anything about it. That's going to be my passion project this fall. See how that turns out. So
I love that. I look forward to hearing about it. Gabrielle, just going to end with you. Is there, for winterizing specifically? I mean, we're in similar climates. What do people want to consider in this part of the year?
With our particular business model, we are also, it's just as important for us to create a space for habitat. So we actually don't prune anything out in the fall. We leave everything up because there's a lot of different egg sacs that have been laid by beneficials, and it becomes shelter. It looks interesting in the winter to have, the different things with ice and snow on it. So because of our climate, we really encourage people to leave everything up until spring. And then again, because of our climate, we don't start cleaning up until soil temperatures are up to 50 degrees, because that's when everything can actually come out of hibernation. Otherwise, you are digging up a lot of ground nesting beneficial insects, and you're taking away their habitat. Now, if you live somewhere wooded and there's plenty of, places for them to live, then we can, or if you have a really big property like mine, I have to start a little bit earlier, and then I'll just make like shrub piles where anything that was living in it or hibernating can then come out when they want. But if you're in a city kind of situation, it's very limited where different insects are able to hibernate or lay eggs for the next generation. And so we encourage people to leave it up if they can tolerate the messiness of it, because a lot of people really want things pristine. And I think we started that culturally at some point to clean everything in the fall so that, you don't have to look at it. But I think it's just as beautiful if you've designed it and planted it to have interesting shapes, like zinnia look beautiful in the winter, and sage looks beautiful in the winter. Echinacea looks beautiful in the winter. So that's what we do.
I love that. Yeah, considering all of the seasons and making sure that it looks good in all of the seasons is certainly something. This is why we hire the professionals, because these are things that we don't think about ourselves. In terms of, are there any things that you would suggest to plant? Like, I think I'm going to be planting garlic soon. Is there anything like that you would say for especially people in maybe more winter climates that they should start considering now to get ahead of for next year?
Absolutely. It's the same. It's the leafy greens. It's too late here to get like brassicas in. You wouldn't get anything produced by the time it's cold, but you can usually hear if they were planted a month ago, then you're definitely going to get them by our frost date is in October-ish, like mid-October. And so then we'll just do like hoops over the crops if you want those things to last a little bit longer. And sometimes we have a winter where we can keep it alive all winter if you have the proper kind of cold frame. Like, and specifically it would have to be a cold crop like celery and carrots and lettuces and kales, that kind of thing.
Okay, awesome. That's the end of my questions. We do have about 15 minutes left. So I didn't see any questions come in as we were going through, I think because people were so captured by what we were saying. So if anybody does have any questions, please feel free to pop them in now. But I will pass it over to the panelists as well. If you have any like final words, or if there's, anything kind of that came up as other people were talking that you would like to share, please feel free to go through that now.
Just to add what Gabrielle was saying, because I didn't mention I live in Los Angeles. I have grown in the Midwest, so I do understand what it's like to have frost. But we have a different kind of situation in Los Angeles. It is possible for us to get frost, but for the most part, we can grow all year round. It's really the light requirement that becomes an issue here. When light drops below 10 hours, your plants don't die, but they just kind of like hang out in the garden. And then you'll notice like come March, that things start exploding and things start growing really fastly. So light is a big requirement too, like in my area. So I try to get, if when planting my like cool season winter garden, I try to get the plants to be at least 75% maturity before sort of December, even because December to January is when we have less than 10 hours, but even kind of November to February, things really slow down quite a bit.
We did have a question that came in as you were talking. So somebody anonymous asked if there's anything you can share about pests such as Japanese beetles or trap crops. They know about marigolds, but are there any other suggestions that you have for these types of pests? Gabrielle, you're nodding, so I'm going to go to you first.
Those are big concerns, obviously, because they nibble on everything or they even destroy things. One of our problems is like squash bugs and, different things like that. And so marigolds, I think, is the most common. I think the science is still out on whether or not that really actually works for everything. I think there's some things that it deters. But for us, it's mostly manual removal or some kind of solution of, like, we'll have like either a pump sprayer or a spray bottle that's a mixture of water, isopropyl alcohol, and then a couple of drops of dish soap. And so if we get a infestation of like squash bugs or something like that, then you are out there every day. You have to make sure and get rid of the eggs. You have to spray the mature adults if or you have to grab them and smash them. So that's what we do, because we don't use any pesticides, or even natural pesticides will kill beneficial insects. And so we try to keep it as natural as possible and as manual as possible. People will do the little slug traps where you put like a lid of beer or, those kinds of things, and those work really well too.
Okay, so lots of natural options. Faith or Elizabeth, do you have anything that you want to add, or anything that's worked for you?
Japanese beetles aren't fun. We don't have that problem in Los Angeles so much, but I've seen it when I was gardening in the Midwest. Yeah, it will make your leaves look like lace. But again, where maybe we could ask where the tree is located, because a lot of times they're finding there's a lot of new science that's suggesting that bugs really only eat things that are like dead, diseased, or dying. And so when a plant is really properly healthy, an insect can't really get to it. So I would really focus again, like on your soil health, making sure that you're really taking care of that, and the life in the soil, because the life in the soil is what's really going to keep your plants photosynthesizing. And when it's properly photosynthesizing, your Brix levels are up, and it helps deter pests from eating.
Absolutely.
It's interesting. Yeah.
And
So
that's
healing
where
it
like
from the
the
inside.
worm castings come in. So that's what will bring up your brick score. And so the plant actually sends out a signal that says, like they have a, negative, positive signal that says, I'm dying, come decompose me. The plant, the pest isn't actually out to damage something. They're out to listen to the plant signal, exactly what she just said. And so then you can have that kind of stuff tested. There's a Dr. Dijkstra that has done most of that study, and you can look him up. And so they're using worm casting specifically. It has to be a pretty intense application, but it does raise the sugar in the plant that tells all the pests that it's healthy.
Interesting. Okay. Nature speaking to each other. I love it. We have a few more questions. So I'll go to the next one, also from somebody anonymous. But if your edible garden is on the counter of your outdoor kitchen, as an example, if they're in pots, are there specific herbs or plants that withstand the heat from maybe some of the cooking equipment better than others? There's some that are a little bit more dramatic, I have found. But does anybody have any tips on that?
I guess it would be the biggest pot that your space can tolerate will create a cooler root space for the plant. And obviously the things that are very fine, like chervil or cilantro, maybe even basil a little bit, are going to be less tolerant than a parsley or a rosemary or a sage, just because they have a thicker leaf. So I would say as big a pot as possible, and then, as far away from the heat as possible.
Does anybody else have anything that they want to add to that, or is that a good summary?
Time
Awesome.
sometimes, yeah. Time seems to work really well in higher heat environments for me. But if I did that on my countertop, everything would die because mine's black. So it gets pretty warm.
It's asking for the sun. Has anybody tried any winter sowing in milk jugs? If so, do you like the results? If not, what do you think is the most successful way to get seedlings ready for the spring? Gabrielle, I might go to you first, just because it's
I have tried that. It's a little tedious for me because the milk jug is kind of a cumbersome thing. I'm blessed with a greenhouse, so I don't have to do that. But when I did try it, it worked really well as long as I was consistent. The key was me. So if I forgot to water, if I forgot to check on things, or or even if it was going to be particularly cold, to cover it with some kind of row cover protection. So I would say that it works perfectly if you do the system correctly.
Has anybody else tried this system? Anybody have advice?
I tried it. It didn't work very well for me personally. I found it, like she said, a little bit annoying to work with, and I ended up neglecting it and I gave up. I think there's easier methods out there, probably.
What do you think would be the most successful way, or what is the most successful way that you have found in growing your seedlings? I mean, I know that you have a greenhouse as well, so there's that added advantage, but if you've tried
I've
different
always
methods,
just,
what was your favorite?
anytime I tried it outdoors, I had issues with the sun becoming either too intense or it getting too cold. So I've always done it either in my greenhouse or indoors next to a window, and that's worked best for me. Heating mats if it needs a little extra heat, but yeah,
Basically, a controlled environment seems to
controlled
be the best
environment
method.
is the easiest. Yeah.
If you're willing to make a little bit of an investment, grow lights are wonderful. I recommend like getting a full spectrum light, so it's a white light, not that purplish color. But if you can get just a shelf that you can put some grow lights on, but yeah, you want a full spectrum light. And temperature is really important. Around 70 degrees, 73 degrees is when a lot of seeds germinate. They all have different, the seed code is kind of like a magic code. It needs like certain conditions for each seed to kind of unlock, but a majority of them kind of will germinate around 70 degrees. We can get more complicated, you know, when it comes to the milk jugs, maybe that was more beneficial, like in cooler climates, particularly like when a few seeds need some like cold stratification, which means they need a cold period to germinate. But that's, I would just, yeah, try your milk jugs and see. It's, again, experimenting always is the best thing. But if you kind of give up on that, I would recommend getting some grow lights and putting it maybe in your laundry room where it's a little bit warmer. And trying that, because that's where I grow a lot of my seedlings, is I start them under grow lights and then I'll bring them outside.
Awesome. Thank
Yeah, I
you.
agree with that.
Great.
Like it's only about $200 to get a seed mat, a tray, and a small light to go over the top of that tray. And what we remind most home gardeners, do not need more than one tray of plants, because you only need a couple of tomatoes, you only need a couple of cucumbers. So like, even though you're buying a packet of seeds that has 25 or 50 or whatever in it, you really only need to plant a couple of them. And so we can plant an entire kitchen garden in literally one tray of plants, and just to give people that experience of growing it from seed.
Yeah, they start so small. That was a fun thing to see in my garden, was my cucumber plant started off so small and then it grew these massive cucumbers. So it's true that you don't need a lot of space to start out. We have one more from somebody who lives in an HOA community that does not allow in-ground nor raised gardens. So what can she sneak in, or what can they sneak into their flower beds? So I'm just going to get a clarification on this question. If the person who asked it can just clarify, do you mean that they don't allow vegetable gardens or like edible gardens specifically? And so what will fit in kind of with other things that you have in the garden? If you can just clarify that. I think that's what you're saying, but I just want to make sure. Yeah, no vegetable gardens allowed. So what are there plants that you recommend that you can kind of sneak into a regular garden that maybe aren't as obvious that they could get away with incorporating?
Herbs are definitely one of those things, just because they're very pretty. They get flowers on them. You know, some of them it's when they went to seed, but you can sneak those in for sure. I have definitely put extra peppers, like because they don't get very big, or extra eggplant into a landscape, but then I'll just put a little cage around it to make sure it doesn't flop over. Or if the person's allowed to do pots, they can have a tomato in a big pot as well, and then put some marigolds or some petunias around it so that it just looks like a planted pot, but then they're getting some tomatoes or a small cucumber, that kind of thing.
There's a woman, a gardener, I think Bree Arthur's her name, but she had the same problem where she was part of an HOA, like in a neighborhood that had an HOA, and she just started tucking annual plants in her landscape. And she's has a couple books out. I think it's Bree Arthur, but yeah, she was growing like rice, and her gardens were beautiful. It looked just like ornamental plants. But she would just tuck them sort of in the landscape here and there. So you can be kind of sneaky about it.
I like that. The sneaky gardener. The person asked specifically also about asparagus, carrots, potatoes. I mean, I guess anything that kind of grows underground are a little bit easier to hide as well. And that's okay to mix them in with other flowers and plants. And
Maybe
as long as they
sweet
get enough
potato.
sun. Yeah, sweet potato. As long as
I
the
was gonna
landscape.
say,
Oh,
go ahead.
sorry. As long as the landscape plants don't shade them out.
okay, give them space, basically. Amazing. Elizabeth, was there something that you were going to add, or were you going to say the same?
I was just gonna say there's a lot of sweet potato varieties that have really pretty foliage that just could look like a ground cover. That would be really nice and easy to get away with.
Amazing.
And you can eat the leaves
All
of the
right.
sweet potato plant too.
Yeah.
Even better. Use all parts of it. Well, we are coming up on time, and that was the last question. I'll just leave 1 more minute to see if anybody has any last questions that they want to get in here. But I do want to thank the 3 of you. Thank you, Elizabeth, Faith, and Gabrielle, so much for joining me today. I learned a lot. I wasn't shy in saying how much I've learned, but I really appreciate you all taking the time to talk about your experience and to go through this panel with me today. I do have some websites on the screen here. So if anybody wants any more information, feel free to reach out to me. I can connect you, go check everything out on their websites and give them a follow as well.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody.